and happy Sabbath to you. I would invite you to come in. Oh, somebody's lights are on. It's a BMW 7EVF 620. If your lights are on, you might want to go out and turn them off, or we have to tow you or jump start you or something. Happy Sabbath. Glad you're here. Please take a seat on the pews that are 50 years old. And sometimes we feel that they're 50 years old. There are bumps and lumps in them, but they are still holding us. I'm very thankful you're here this morning for this very special weekend. Wow, 50 years. That's a long, long time. Last night, if you were here, you saw a couple of video clips. This morning, we will have several of them, and I would like to start off with Dr. Wynn, who will welcome us this morning and share a little bit about his memories from 50 years ago.
I remember doing different things when the church was being built because I kind of bump into them. Okay. Like looking up there, thinking about what it was like to be carrying mud up the scaffolding and grouting these walls.
Now, when you say carrying it up the scaffolding, are we talking about bucket loads?
Bucket loads, yeah. I was too young to go up all that high, but I can't imagine how many bucket loads of mud I carried so that they could pour them down the walls.
Mm-hmm. Hauling mud.
Mm-hmm. Taking orders from Ole Walker.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. What has it been like for you to watch the building go up,
yeah,
but you've also watched this congregation?
For a long time.
Long time.
When I walked in tonight and saw Jerry Orr and Lee and Dottie Crane,
sure,
I love the sensation of realizing I've known these people and I've given these people hugs on Sabbath for 50 years and more. It makes me feel so fortunate that I've been able to be a member of this community for this long and to see the great things that still happen. Jerry was just telling me about some of the things that she's up to, reaching out to single mothers. And she's still going.
Yeah. Still making a difference.
So it's been one of the biggest blessings in my life to be affiliated with Carmichael Church this long. It has been one of the best things that's ever happened in my life. I raised my daughters here. I watched them grow up here. Yeah, and I will probably grow old here because none of my family wants to move away.
It's a good place.
It is a fine place to grow old.
It is a good place. And it's a fantastic church. And you can only have a really good church if you have a building. You will hear more about that later. One of my favorite things on mission trips is to grout. It really is. Just pour that mud through the brick. I cannot imagine being up there. That is high, guys. That is really high to be up there. But Dr. Wynn is so right. It's not about the building, it's about the people, isn't it? So all through this morning, you will hear snippets of people and what this church has meant to them over the years. Now, I am just kind of curious. How many of you were here the very first Sabbath? How many of you actually walked? Please stand and we can see. How many of you were here? Wow. Welcome back. Glad you're here. Very, very nice. Now, we also know that a group of people needs to be, what's the word? Shepherded? Is that a word? You have a shepherd, and a shepherd leads, so shepherded, right? Led. And we have senior pastors. Don Mulvihill, I'm so thankful that you can be here this morning. Last night we had Elder Dave Osborne. This morning we have Elder Don Mulvihill here. And you will hear the next senior pastor, the one who is currently here, a little bit later this morning. Are there, right now, this moment, are there other associate pastors? Because I know a senior pastor cannot do it by himself. Are there associate pastors who have been here over the last 50 years? If so, will you please stand? I am already standing, so please stand with me. Welcome. Glad you're here. Very thankful you're here. A group of people does not lead itself. So thank you, leaders, for being here this morning. I know that many others wanted to be here, but it happens to be a big Sabbath in many churches. It's Christmas. It's Christmas Sabbath. And I don't know, the people who were planning this 50 years ago, they must not have thought about that, but it's all good. I wish I could have been there 50 years ago. And this morning you will hear some people who were. Steve, you were here 50 years ago. Actually, you were one of the ones who walked over. So Steve and Don Mulvihill will take it over from me from now. But before we do that, let's have a word of prayer. God, thank you so very, very much. We have so much to celebrate, so much to be thankful for. We thank you for a building that right now is cozy and warm. We thank you for pews that have held us for all those years. But most of all, we thank you for the people, because a building by itself is nothing but a building. But a building filled with people is where you rest. So please be with us the rest of this morning. In your name, amen. Steve, Don?
Well, to see you, for a little boy that grew up down in Walnut Grove in the southern Sacramento River Delta, to come and see these people, a lot of them the same. What a shock that was. But when I began to see you as people, individuals, and it was really neat, Steve, to have a chance. Most churches, the elders all get squirreled away somewhere before church to get organized. But here they made them come at 9:30 or earlier. And we had this time to circulate and get to know each other and to be able to preach to people we knew was wonderful. Well, Steve has been great. You know, I talk of him as a double jeopardy guy, because he came out of college at PUC and he went to Lodi, and I was there. And then he came out of seminary with a couple of degrees, and I was here, and we grabbed him, and he's still here. What does that say, Steve?
All kinds of things.
Well, I think you're taking right off with the next person, aren't you?
You call it double jeopardy. I call it a double blessing. What a treat to be able to come back to my home church where I grew up, and then to be able to come back when Don Mulvihill was the senior pastor. I got to intern under him at Lodi. It was indeed a double blessing for me. And now I get to be here as a church member. And so it's wonderful to do that. But if we go back 50 years ago, and we had some people stand who were here, we actually have the chairman of the building committee here. So Jim, if you'd be willing to stand up here for a moment. And our family moved here in the summer of '65. So this building was already up. I got to help build the youth chapel, but this building was here, and we met at the old church until December of that year. Sabbath school was over at the Sacramento Union Academy. And you are here right now, and you brought your bride, your adoring, affectionate wife of all these years, and you also have your 62 years. And your two sons, yes, 62 years. And your two sons, Dr. Reese and Dr. Reese, are here. We could call him James Reese, but those of us who were around 50 years ago would call him Jamie, sure. And Ron is here as well. So we're glad they're here. Now, we have just a short time right now, so please, by all means, talk to all of these Reese family members and get more details about what happened 50 years ago. But Jim, give us some of the snippets of being the building committee chairman for this incredible edifice.
I have about 16 pages here, so I'm going to... All right, thank you.
So anyway, I was over at the old church there on Garfield. Remember that place? And it had wide open windows. And next door, every Sabbath morning at exactly 11 o'clock, the dogs would start barking and the fellow would start mowing his lawn. Well, it was kind of difficult, but finally Pastor went over to him and talked to him, and so 11 o'clock it was okay. Well, by that time, the place was packed. Started out with 150, and then it had 200, and that was terrible because everybody was sitting on top of each other. So Bud Hofstar, who is a member of our church but also worked for an architectural firm, built a balcony up there that held 95 people. So we'd all climb, a lot of people would climb up there, fill the place, and that was full. And they said, Dr. Reese, we'll give you $5,000, go out and find us a place to build a church. So with $5,000, I started out, and it took me a long time because I went to a lot of places. So the church was only 10 years old, but it looked like it was 30. And there was a building committee that was initially organized, and it consisted of W.W. Hofstar, that's Bud Hofstar, Haskell Caldwell, Dr. Caldwell, Esther Stebner, and Vanta Kuperis. We tried to negotiate with Sacramento Union Academy to build a church on the corner there of their property, 2.5 acres. And we waited for about 17 weeks or something like that. Nobody answered us, so we moved on. Fortunately, there was a lady in our church who knew the Savages, the people and Savages over on Winding Way, who had some property they would like to sell, but they didn't want to sell to a developer who would have a big box store or something like that. So with that, I went over and I talked to the Savage family, and we worked it out on the 2nd of July, 1962. The church board authorized the purchase of 6 acres of land for a purchase price of $45,000. And so we had a $5,000 down payment, which was pretty magnificent. And then the dynamic leadership and the fundraising capacity, only one person could do it. It was Elder Joseph Apigian.
There are stories galore about him.
Well, yes, that'll take up the rest of the hour. Anyway, we got started, and the purchase of the land was completed in 1963, and we held groundbreaking ceremonies on the 23rd of February, 1964. So Elder Piggin wanted a church of 750 people. And I said, Elder, you know, right over here is the Sacramento Academy, and we're going to attract people. Let's build a church for 1,000. So,
How many were attending at this time?
Oh, I don't know, probably 400 or 500, something like that.
And you wanted to more than double the space.
Oh, yes.
Now that takes some vision, doesn't it?
Well, it computes.
Obviously.
So anyway, went down to the building, to the officials downtown, and we wanted to have a church of 1,000. And we suddenly found out if you had 1,000, you had to go through a different code. So we ended up with a church that was 999.
Of course.
So anyway, it was just amazing to me the church of 422 members could grow to 639 members by the time of the first meeting of the church on Christmas Day, 1965. Well, I have a lot more to say, but I'm not going to say it in time. But you have to choose an architect, and then you have to choose a building superintendent. Well, we went through the whole list, and we got an architect who was willing to work with a donated labor church. It's not, architects want to run this thing, and they hire out somebody, but we have donated labor. And so we found one that did, and it was it was so nice that Earl John Taylor, who incidentally is a Mormon, and he was the head of the Mormon stake, which is over here on Eastern Avenue. But he worked out very well for us.
Tell us a little about the contractors. Some of the people remember Ole Walker, and he is literally buried right out here in the garden area. He was the contractor for this church. Tell us about Ole Walker.
Well, Ole Walker is a genius, was a genius, and it's still a genius in my mind. For, the Piggin raised money, and I did a little work here, but Ole Walker was an incredible person. He could take this sheet of paper that had a bunch of stuff on it and turn it into real stuff. All this building is just by looking at a piece of paper, and he was an incredible genius. And I sorely miss Walkie, but we owed him a tremendous bit of gratitude. The building committee also had other people they wanted to share with. There was an organ committee, and on that organ committee was Jerry Orr and two others, Dr. Robert Myers and Emerald Rogers, and they chose him Allen organ. And the initial organ concert was given by Del Case on that organ.
My twin brother.
Yeah.
We're not related at all, actually.
So it's great, and we always appreciate the fact that it had an antiphonal organ back there. There was a decoration committee, and Millie Swingle, and Dr. Kai Peel, and Grace Badzik were on it. And the bride's room was done by Benton and Doreen Hood. And the interesting thing about being a donated labor church is you have to have somebody tell you what to do and how to do it. So there were people out there sawing bricks. Incidentally, I want to talk about the bricks. You see all the beautiful bricks in this mill, about this fine? They're not that way originally. They were this high, double side, and we went over there to buy the bricks, and that's all we could get. So we had a setup, and it worked, where they had a saw that would saw a groove in these bricks all the way around. Every brick in this church was sawed, so it looks like they're individual bricks. A very interesting.
I never knew that, all these years. How many of you are just hearing this for the first time? My goodness, every single one of these is really a double brick.
Yeah.
Don Noble, you probably noticed that when you first walked in. Jim, we have a number of other people that need to come up here, but I'm going to ask that people ask you questions. You're going to be here for lunch today too, right?
I certainly am, and I'm sorry to take so much time.
No, we want to hear the stories. I know we could go several hours, and I know that Jamie and Ron were able to hear a number of your building committee meetings in your house. I think you're meeting twice a week at your house, and they were just wondering if there would ever be a time when it would just be the Reese family. So, I mean, they've got stories to tell, too. I'm sure they've heard things they should not have heard. So thank you so much for sharing this and for being a pioneer, a visionary. Today, I don't know if you recognize this or not. I do. You recognize that. What do you recognize it as?
Well, it's a Bible.
What kind of Bible? What translation?
It's called a New English Bible.
That's right. It was heretical back 50 years ago.
It was.
This is my copy. And the reason I have it is because this is what you used in the youth Sabbath school class, and I wanted to be like Dr. Reese. So I bought this as a young adult because of you.
I enjoyed the teaching of that class. They had some marvelous young people in there, and they, you look to see what they've done, and I'm very proud of that being there.
Well, you led in the construction of this church, but as has already been stated, the people are what count. So thank you so much for your service.
Thank you.
Now, as some of you know, the fellowship hall was not built when the rest of this building was. So, Don, can you tell us about someone who helped out with the construction of the fellowship hall?
I'm thinking just now of following good pastors. Reinhold Tilstra was just before me, and I think Lee Crane was the building. Would you come up here, Lee, and tell us how that came about, that we needed a fellowship hall, apparently. Why did we need that?
I knew I should have gone before Dr. Reese because he stole all my thunder. I wanted to be the one to tell you about the bricks. Every one of those bricks had to go through a saw, and I wish every one of you would look at it when you consider this block building, every one of those bricks. Also, Dr. Reese didn't mention about, it's easy to come and plunk down $45,000 to buy a piece of land, but that wasn't the end of it. The neighbors around here particularly didn't want an Adventist church here because of the reputation for Adventist churches. And they didn't want another one. And so Dr. Reese had to go down with the Sacramento Building Commission or whatever it is down there and work through some of his influential patients, and we got permission to build it. Since then, the neighbors have, even some of them I believe, have written saying how happy they are that we have a representative church here. So it wasn't just a slam dunk situation. And then one other little thing. This all has to do with the fellowship hall, Don. You can sit down because I only have an hour. Yeah. Fellowship hall based upon all of this, but we had a little bit of a union problem. They didn't want the pre-mix trucks coming across to a non-union job, and so through Tom Michelson that knew the Erickson construction, they just gave us a pre-mix truck out here to use. So we did our own. And when you think of Warren Webster, in fact, Barbara Nahorny's father, curb and gutter, come out here on a 105-degree day and pour curb and gutter, concrete. Dr. Greenlaw, come out here at night. He was a physician for the county and go down through all of these dark alleys in this church pulling electrical wire, and on and on and on. So the biggest miracle to me is not that we raised the money and had it paid for when we got in here, but that it got built. And without any major injuries, because up here on this roof and up here in the front of that scaffolding, when some of us are a little nervous getting 12 feet off the ground, working on the side of this, which says a lot for Ole Walker, he put up with us on all of those things. And then Dr. Reese mentioned this too. Did you see my notes? About the membership. The membership during the building of this church increased. The percentage of tithe increased. Offerings outside of our $15,000, $20,000 a week for the building increased, all during a building. That tells you the spirit that was here. And then the union business, again, we'd get a call from Paul Taylor. He used to be sort of the volunteer coordinator at 10 o'clock at night, said we just got a load of these bricks, blocks that came in. So we would come up here and unload that truck at 10 o'clock at night with all of those blocks in there. And so it was a wonderful time. And anyway, I'm getting to the youth chapel now, to the multipurpose room. We did, at the youth chapel, an interesting thing there is that I was involved in that too, and one of the most interesting aspects of that, you always have carpet color and this and that and the other thing, but it was the stained glass windows. There was a little bit of opposition to the stained glass windows being related maybe to other churches that have a lot of stained glass windows, and so, but that got through, and that's very nice. Are you trying to cut me off?
Oh, I'm just enjoying this, but we are getting to the fellowship hall?
The fellowship, okay. Well, there's parts of that story I can't even tell you, but the way it began was a miracle. The way it began wasn't exactly the way we had planned, but how we got the money for that was that we had a bunch of members in the church, and they all had these little gatherings. You remember, we'd get a group together, and we would take commitments from this various little dinner groups around the country that were given by members. And then we were all coming back here to the church for a big praise session. If we reached a minimum, then we would go ahead with the building, which at that time we figured we had the minimum, and so we went ahead. And it was an interesting project because we not only had a kitchen, we had a fireside room, we had the Sabbath school rooms, we had a meeting, and so of course there was a lot of discussion on types of doors and this and that and the other thing. But it's really been a blessing, and that's how we financed it.
In fact, I remember Elder Piggy wouldn't preach until he raised $20,000.
Well, you know, it's a very interesting thing. Elder, the first Sabbath, Dottie and I were at the old church. Kelly Striblin and Dr. Mars came up and they said, Dottie and Lee, we want you to worship with us here. Our pastor is a little different. You will get used to him. And we would be out there, and he would. He said, how many will give $5,000? And how many will give 3 and 2? And it would go way down. And some of those of us that were young and just in town and just starting to work, and we raise our hand, and he'd say, well, Dr. Crane, didn't you just come to town? You gave $100. Well, it made these other people that have been here for 20 years a little cheap if they didn't give more than that. And so we ended up, we ended up with, I think, probably $15,000 a week, I would guess. Yeah.
Lee, tell me, what to you came out of the Fellowship Hall organization that made you feel good, the feel-good thing?
Well, I'll tell you, the lot of things. One of the things that we were noted for here, and Gordon Botting will tell you about that, but we had a real wonderful health program over there, going into all of the various things he'll talk about, from grief recovery, weight, stop smoking. We'd have, these health fairs where you draw blood and check cholesterols and things like that, which was a very active thing and well known. Like the sheriff's department in Sacramento, many of them come out and they consider their life saved because they came out and they quit smoking, for instance. And grief recovery, of course, what a blessing that was, and Gordon will talk about that.
Thank you.
But it did give us oh, you want me to stop?
Will you tell Dottie we love her?
Yeah, we'll tell Dottie. I haven't spoken, and I'll cut my notes short since Dr. Reese talked about most of it. But anyway, it was a real blessing, and never has our church been more united and than when we were building this church. And I think that's a universal, even though Steve was knee-high then, but I think our togetherness has never been greater.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
He mentioned Dr. Botting. We have a short video clip just before Dr. Botting.
Well, I was in charge of the Sunday lunches, and we had lists of people, and then you had to call and you had to make sure, because we gave them a full meal. I mean, they had their entree, they had their vegetables, they had their dessert.
Did they have a favorite meal?
Well, I don't know. We had a lot of good women that, in casseroles and all that kind of stuff. And you knew who the good cooks were, and a lot of women broke, and I brought food. No, it was, and it went on and on and on.
You watched this building go up, and you've continued on as a member here.
Yeah.
How has it felt to just watch this church?
Well, I couldn't do it my age now, what I did that many years ago. I know that, you'd kind of nice to sit back and, look at it and everything's done. But yeah, we had chairs. I mean, we didn't, but it's nice and we've kept it up. I mean, it was a big undertaking.
Do you have a favorite memory from that time?
No, well, it was easier coming in here because I was secretary, and here you had one building. Before, we had buildings and we used the homes next door, so you had to run around and stuff in buildings.
So you were church secretary?
Well, yeah. For a lot of, and you had to take everything to all the different divisions, and then you got, and you go pick them up, and the offerings and things like that.
And you've been involved in ministry here in the church for quite a few years.
Yeah.
You've been involved in...
I'm kind of slowing down now,
Wow.
but there are other people that do it. Yeah, I've done it. And my husband was quite active, but now I'm getting, so let some of the younger people do it. And there's still a few of the people that are still around that were the active ones.
Yeah.
And you learned who you could count on and who could bring food and the men that worked. Yeah. But it was a pleasure. Now it's kind of nice just to sit and enjoy it.
This is a place where potlucks every Sabbath. That was a challenge. Gordon, you came on board here. Before you came, there was volunteers tried to do health programs, but they really blossomed under your coming.
Well, thank you. It was a real miracle coming here. I was surprised. I got a call from Pastor Tilstra, who was the pastor here for 14 years when I was a student at Loma Linda. And he said the physicians and the dentists and other healthcare professionals would like to have a full-time health pastor at their church. And I said to him, I'm really sorry, but I've already been appointed the health director for the North New Zealand Conference, and I'll be going back home. But he said, come for an interview. And so I came for an interview, and they said, yes, we'd love you to come here. And I said, well, I've only got 2 weeks before I was due to fly home. And I said, if you can get me a green card in that 2 weeks, I will stay and serve here at the church. And Dr. Roy Matthews and some other influential people must have worked really hard, because in 10 days, my wife and I went in and we got our green card. And we're here. So I believe we're here because God ordained that process.
Amen. And your wife.
But I have to say, if it wasn't for the healthcare people in this church and Pastor Tilstra's real determination that we have a healthcare program, this probably would never have happened. But it was a joy to be here 5 years. We came on February 1, 1981, and what a joy to work with probably about 150 volunteers in this church helped me run the programs throughout the year. Our goal was we ran 6 health programs every quarter. I counted one quarter, we actually did 14 health programs. Smoking cessation was one of our bigger ones. We would see 500 people from the community every year in the fellowship hall there. And we would run both an evening and a morning program, because sometimes we would get whole departments from the State Department. And also one time I had the Sacramento Bee night shift come in the morning, and we had about 20 of them come through the smoking cessation program. We tried to have a weight management every quarter. We had a stress, and we also had like exercise program, what you probably call jazzercise. And the lady that led out on that actually married one of our doctor's sons here. So we had a marriage along the way. Probably one of the most interesting things is we tried something. We did continuing education for nurses, and at least 3 times a year for 5 years, we had 100 nurses from the community come to our program. And I have to tell you, Defina Matthews and many of the other doctors' wives would come and put a 5-course meal on for those people. I remember many years later, I would be visiting around California when I was doing smoking cessation for the state. Nurses would stop me and say, we loved coming to your program here at Carmichael. So I take my hat off to all those doctors' wives and dentists' wives who really helped make that program really go. There was some interesting things too, Don. One time we had in our smoking cessation program, at the tables, we had different people, usually people that had been smokers before. So we had a lot of guests from the community that helped us. And I had to laugh one time. It was sad, but it was humorous too. One of the people that was a table host, and I believe that he quit smoking and so forth, he told me one time, while he was in the program, he stopped at a stop sign, and that's usually a key for a smoker to light up while he's waiting for the change of lights. He lit up, and he looked across, and here was somebody from his table sitting across from there. So all sorts of things, interesting things happened. Probably for me was the fact that we had a number of baptisms, and after 2 years, we ran an evangelistic program and invited all the people that had come to our program. And I think that was a great idea, and we continued with a Sabbath school class, and I wrote lessons for that on health and the Bible so that people could come to that program.
Well, Gordon, thinking of your wife too, wasn't she with Adventist Health?
At that time,
At
yes.
that time,
Yeah.
because Adventist Health was a great boost to this church as well as all the churches around this area.
It was,
and we
yes.
give that joy to them too. But Joy, as you leave this a moment, what's the feel good about the thing?
I think the feel good is that we know that 1,200 families in this community were affected every year in coming here. Probably one of the most exciting things was our health fair we conducted every year. We'd see 800 people. There were hundreds of people lined out to the streets waiting to come to our health fair in September every year. And that was exciting to see so many people. I would say probably the most interesting thing, we were on the cutting edge of health in those days. And I believe if we would re-look at where things are happening today, what stop smoking was back then when we would see at least 100 people come each quarter. I believe today emotional health is the big issue in our country. And I would like to see our church begin to do more on emotional and mental health, because I believe that's the future. And it really leads into spiritual aspects that would be helpful.
Well, aren't we thankful for this period?
Thank you.
I think it's a real testimony of how many medical professionals have been in this church and how they have seen church and their medical profession working together in both places. We have another video clip to show you at this time.
Steve was 4, and Diane was a year and a half.
And Jeff was 5 months when we moved in.
When we moved into the church, he was almost 6 months old.
Wow. So your children kind of grew up with the church here?
This is the only church they knew.
Really? Wow.
Diane was married here.
Married here, all their Sabbath school experiences here. Yeah. I understand some Pathfinder experiences mixed in there.
35 years worth.
35 years of Pathfinder experience. Wow, wow.
That's the greatest kept secret in that church.
Is it? Well, we just put it on film, so it's no longer a secret. When you look back at that building experience, you know, we talked about Pastor, his fundraising process. Can you think of any events that kind of stand out in your mind about in the building time?
You know, one thing that was really neat that I don't know if anyone else has mentioned, but Gordon Marshall was very impressed with what was going on, and he was very impressed with Ole himself. And he came down here, and he didn't feel there was adequate scaffolding for the church in here. Ole wanted some scaffolding. The ceilings are high. So he put up the money for the scaffolding. And he thought Ole would go down and buy whatever it was, you know, wood. And he made all the scaffolding himself. And then when they started building the youth chapel, he took all that wood and put it into the youth chapel. So the actual ceiling of the youth chapel and whatever wood is out there, he used from that scaffolding.
By the way, I've been told that out in the lobby, come on this side, Karen, In the lobby, you'll find this on some tables, some blank sheets if you want to record some of your memories. What you're hearing here may spark some of your own memories, or those who have been up here. I know you've been cut short on time, but feel free to jot some of those down, and those will be collected. That's out in the narthex, just some blank sheets for that. Karen, have a seat here. About halfway through these 50 years, Maranatha Volunteers International relocated from Michigan out here to Sacramento, and has been very influential in this particular church. There are a number of people who have been on short-term mission trips even before Maranatha came here, but certainly since Maranatha's presence here. And it's been youth projects, and there's also been adults who have gone on projects, and this church has been involved in some very large projects. You work at Maranatha. Tell us a little bit about the relationship of Carmichael Church and Maranatha and short-term missions.
Well, it's absolutely been a pleasure. We actually, from the very beginning, we moved here in 1989. We sort of called this our home church because a lot of our staff members were coming here. Now our staff is quite a bit larger, and they're attending various churches in the area. But our first project with Carmichael was in March of 1990 to Mexico. And it was called a Carmichael Youth Project. And that was the first of many projects that ended up happening. And one of the things that our staff has noticed is how involved the entire church is in the process of the mission project. You have the prayer partners, and I'm specifically referring to that wonderful planning session before Mozambique. All the pictures of the participants on the walls, the commitment that you all took for the thousands of dollars to go over there. It was really remarkable, but not only for the travel and to get everybody there, but you also committed funds. We hear time and time again from churches how we don't think we should do this. We don't think we should embark on something so expensive because we're having trouble with our church budget. And then there are people that step up to the plate and say, you know, we really need to step out in faith. We really need to do this. And never once have we heard that a church has been sorry that they did that. Because every single time, just like was mentioned earlier, you get better offerings, you get more church involvement, you get bigger tithes. It's just people feel more a part of what is going on. And I just want to commend you as a congregation for stepping out in faith and doing some of these really, really large projects that have made such a huge difference.
Indeed, that is happening here at Carmichael time after time. I'm just wondering, if you went as one of the representatives for the church on one of the short-term mission trips, would you just stand where you are right now? Those that went as a representative of the church, and keep standing, because like Karen said, it was a whole church thing. I'm going to now ask those who were supportive and involved in the mission trip, whether it was fundraising, being a prayer partner, helping with the lunches, if you would stand as well. Yeah. I mean, it was a whole church kind of experience that happened here. And in the words of Esther Stebner, this is just like when we built the church. That's what happened time after time. Thank you. You may be seated. And we did have the discussion. We can't afford to raise, I think it was $400,000 when we were in the hole for our church budget. And that year, giving went up for the church budget in addition to $400,000. So I've heard this many times, if a church is in the hole, they should go on a mission trip. Anything else you'd like to share with us?
Yes, I would like to tell you that I have an update. How many of you here went to Peru? That was a significant number of people. 2005. You built 2 churches, one in Pisac and one in Calca, both in the Sacred Valley. And at the time, those churches were relatively small. They were new groups. And since you have been there, in the last 10 years, the Pisac Church, which was the one closest to where you were staying, has now 4 daughter churches. And the Calca Church has 3 daughter churches. Wow. And one of the daughter churches, Robert and I were in Peru back in 2009, and we had a chance to go and see one of the daughter churches of Calca meeting literally behind someone's home under a lean-to. So they left their beautiful church, went a mile away, and started another one. And I just think that just says so much about the gift that they've received and how they want to give it to somebody else.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. And there are contractors in this church who went on those mission trips who have done mission trips here in Sacramento as well. We have found as a church that when we do something for others, it always benefits ourselves as well. And we're glad to have the Maranatha employees here. I see Don and Laura Noble, and I see the Weisses and the Godfreys, and on it goes. We have another video clip for you at this time.
What was it like as then, we'll say, a spiritually single person to participate in a church building a brand new facility like this?
A little difficult.
How did you survive that? I mean, that is a journey.
Good friends. Lots of good friends at the church.
Yeah. How did they show their friendship?
They just took me in and loved me, and it was just really, really neat. Several of them I remember from sitting with me, like Betty Aldred Holland sat with us. And she always had candy or gum for the kids, which was really neat.
Yeah.
And then Esther and Ed Stebner always welcomed us. Very good friends, very friendly.
Yeah.
Lee and Dottie Crane, the Godfreys.
People that take the time to get to know your name and get to know your kids. That's great. How do we, you're looking back at your time here originally, and you just mentioned again friendliness. How do we keep that alive?
That's an interesting question. We just have to, all of us, be friendly.
Glad to see a family down front here. Leona Finley. Sure. To see a family, 4 generations?
Yes. Oh.
Well, just share with
Here. Anyway, when we started over at the Garfield Church, and then we came over here, we watched it being built, and we had 6 children, and so they enjoyed all the Sabbath school classes that we had, and all of them went to the SUA, not at the same time, but I counted up, and I had one child at least in SUA for 24 years. They didn't all go at the same time, but and the church helped with the tuition, because we just couldn't make it all. But we had a good. They had a good time, and then my children grew up, and some of them had left the area, and some of them they all had families of their own, and when Autumn was born, her parents would bring her over to me every weekend after she was 3 months old, and I brought her here to church, Sabbath school, all these years, and she was, now her little girl is enjoying enjoying being here. And I went with Autumn to all her Sabbath school classes from being tiny till she graduated and went to the youth chapel. And I helped teach the single Sabbath school classes and helped where I could. We did a lot of cutting of pictures and papers and stuff. And for the last 6 or 8 years, I've helped stuff the church bulletins. And another girl, Ruth, helped me, or we both worked together and enjoyed visiting while we stuffed the bulletins. And
And isn't this the life of walking with Jesus? This is how we walk with Jesus in prayer, study, and service. And if you can, at age 93, is it?
what's that?
92.
92. I'll be 93
Stand
in
up and
March.
speak. That it would be a gift from God, wouldn't it? Maybe, is this Luther?
Yeah.
Here, Jesus.
I would just like to say that I remember running around this church as it's being constructed with like Fred Matthews and Ron Reese and Pam Ellsworth and Cynthia Case, and they called us, I think, the Carmichael Kids. And but I just want to, I'm so proud of my mom. I did the math. There's 52 Sabbaths a year times 50. That's 2,600 Sabbaths that this week will mark. And so I think my mom's been here at least 2,500 of them. So she's been so faithful as a prayer warrior and everything. I know in 1967, my father committed suicide, and Carmichael Church stood up, and there was the hands and face of Jesus, and supported us and loved us, and truly fulfilling the gospel mission as taking care of the widows and the fatherless. You know, I don't know how you could do it without a church family, and I know as a young adult, I drifted away from the church and got involved with drugs and alcohol. And I got involved with methamphetamines, and it's when I met a girl named Claire, and she had similar addictions, and we both wanted to get out of that lifestyle, but it's so hard to. And I told her about a church that I used to go to as a kid. And I think in 1989, we walked through the back doors there. And I think my mom almost fell off the pew. And but we was met with so much love and acceptance. We've been coming to church ever since, you know. And it was just through a series of miracles we was able to overcome our addictions. And we was baptized in the Rose Court in 1989. And then in 1990, our son Forrest was born, and this church was a wonderful place to foster a family, and we went through all the Sabbath school classes and everything. And then in 2007, my wife Claire was diagnosed with ALS, and once again, you know, this church was such a valuable support group to us, you know, through that time. I just, as she, life drained away from her body, you know, the church stepped up and helped, you know, bring food over, respite care, mowing the lawns and everything, you know, and through that loss of home and spouse and job and everything, the church was here. So anyways, I just, one takeaway thing I wanted to say is in 2015, as we prepare for the second Advent, Carmichael Church is a safe place to bring your family, friends, and neighbors, and
Amen.
so to meet Jesus.
Amen. That's family. And this is Autumn?
Yeah.
Autumn.
So I can think of no better place to bring my daughter every week, and I know there's just such a loving church family for her to grow up and be a part of, and it's just so nice to have a place where I can be in Sabbath school and I can look over and see another mom that I went through Sabbath school with there with her children, and it's just so nice to have that legacy and such a loving place to be. Can you say hi?
Hi.
Fourth generation.
Say happy Sabbath. No?
Happy
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the Finley family.
Thank you. There's one more family we would like to bring up front. Rita, if you would bring your family on up here. We are celebrating 50 years since the completion of this church, December 25, 1965. Rita, can you tell us what happened the next day, December 26, 1965? Oh, we're not quite on. Number 3.
Now?
Yeah.
Fred Duncan and I were privileged to have the fun and the excitement of being the first couple to be married right here.
Come on over this way a little bit.
I first came to Carmichael, fresh from Pacific Union College, to teach at Sacramento Union Academy in the fall of 1969. Another first-year teacher, Pat Nelson, and I shared an apartment around the corner on Manzanita Avenue. So the Carmichael Church was the convenient place for us to bring our membership. I stayed at Carmichael, though, not out of convenience, but because of what I found here. Friends, and actually, I found family as well. The Heim family, those of you who were here then will remember Maxine and Ernie Heim and their daughters, April and Laura. They introduced me to Ernie's cousin, Fred Duncan, and that's how I became family there. After our marriage, we made friends here. 5 years later, our daughter Audra was born at 4:40 on a Sabbath morning, and Fred made sure that it was well announced in church that day. 3 years later, our son Andrew was born, and just a few months after that, Fred's job took us to Vacaville. Because we expected to be there for a few years, we moved our membership there. When we wanted our children to be able to come back to go to high school at Sacramento Adventist Academy, we came back to Carmichael Church as well, and I've been here ever since. It's been a privilege to have my family grow up here, and more so to really feel that this is my home church. 9 years ago, we had Fred's memorial service right here as well. And as I think back at that bride in 1965, I realized what a naive young woman I was, expecting to live happily ever after. And of course, as everyone's life happens, there are happy days and there are less happy days. And through it all, I've realized that the Lord always provides His love and His grace to get us through. And I found also that His love and His grace took the form, oftentimes, of this church family. Thank you so much. I am blessed.
Amen. Thank you. And Audra, you're the next generation.
The next generation. So my mom already talked about how when I was born, this was my first church. We came back when I was a teenager. I was here during the young adult days. We were very blessed to have such a wonderful, active group of young adults. And Ken and Brenda Weiss are here. They were from that group. Jeff back in the sound booth, he was in that group. Several other people that are here today. And one day, I was in Sabbath school, young adult Sabbath school, over in the fellowship hall, and this guy walks in.
I had just moved to Sacramento. I was about 3 years out of school. I didn't know anyone here. I moved up for a job, and this was before Google, so I got out the phone book and looked for the local Adventist church, and came Sabbath morning, walked into the lobby, and immediately Zarita Kramer came over and grabbed me by the arm. She's sitting over there. Zarita grabbed me by the arm and marched me off to the fireside room where the young adults had Sabbath school. And I've met a lot of good friends now. Some of them are here, some of them have scattered across the country and even around the world, but we all bonded during that time and stayed together. And that's where I met Audra, of course.
And 20 years ago in July, walked down that aisle. We got married right here, right in front of this church. And our children were born. They were both dedicated right up here on this platform. Andreas was baptized right out there in the baptistry last year. This year, Annalise was baptized up at Leone Meadows Camp, not far from here. And then we voted her into membership right up here on this platform. So this is home and this is family. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of you who have blessed our family through the years.
Thank you. Oh, wait. Our final word needs to be from the next generation. So from the third generation, what would you like to share with us?
I was thinking my first memory here was when my brother was being dedicated. And I don't know how I remember it because I was only 2, but I got to go up front on the stage. And I just thought it was so cool. And I remember waving at my uncle and waving at all my friends. Since then, I've been up there more, but.
All I have to say is that I grew up here, I was raised here, and it's been a wonderful experience to be here my whole life, and I've made a lot of my good friends here.
And we join Julie Clary in saying we're looking forward to seeing more and more of what you are doing. Thank you, Duncan and Krellman family.
And can't we say that we've all been blessed really more than we deserve? But thank God, Christ deserves. And he's coming again. We've talked about past, but the future is still ahead. And he's preparing us, and he'll come soon. Shall we pray? Our Father in heaven, how good it has been to be together here, to see and experience and know that you are still working among us in dramatic ways, in little ways every day. And we praise thee for your grace, your mercy, that you forgive because you want to do that more than anything else, to see us together in your kingdom. Amen.